Not everyone who hurts you raises their voice. Some people don't need to shout to bring you down. Their mere presence is enough. A dispassionate look when you share your joy. A casual comment that makes you question yourself. A fake nod when what you really need is genuine support. They don't destroy you with daggers, but with tiny needles day after day until you begin to think, maybe I'm just too sensitive. We often think enemies are those who attack us openly. But the truth is, most emotional damage comes from the ones we once trusted. Stoic philosophy doesn't teach us to avoid people, it teaches us to be deliberate about who deserves access to our inner life. A resilient mind is not a closed mind, but a mind with boundaries. One that knows who to invite in and who to let go. Because self-control doesn't begin with behavior, it begins with awareness. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk alone, in silence. 1. The chronic complainer. You've met someone like this. They don't raise their voice, demand attention, or insult anyone. Yet after each conversation, you walk away feeling heavy, as if you've carried some invisible baggage for them. There's no clear conflict, just the same sad phrases on repeat, well-timed sighs, and empty stares as if searching for someone to carry their feelings for them. They talk about the overwhelming job, the indifferent partner, the unfair world. Every time you meet, it's the same story, the same wound, the same unresolved struggle. You wonder, am I being unempathetic? But slowly you realize this is no longer about sharing to be understood, it's emotional poisoning, slow and subtle, where you're drawn into their world without knowing. Complaining, when it becomes habitual, is no longer honesty, it's a calculated way to avoid responsibility. Because as long as they keep blaming what's beyond control, they never have to face the real question, what have I done to change it? Stoicism teaches us that inner peace doesn't come from having an easy life, but from how we perceive and respond to what we cannot control. A Stoic does not deny reality, nor pretend everything is fine. They simply refuse to let what's beyond their reach invade their mind. And that's exactly what the complainer never does. They blame the world, but never own their part. They demand to be heard, but refuse to listen. They call their negativity sharing and expect you to nod, to comfort, to stay silent and never challenge them. That's when you must be clear-headed. Not everyone who wants to be heard deserves your full presence. You have the right to preserve your silence. You have the right to decline being an emotional dumpster for those unwilling to change. A true friend doesn't just share sorrow. They take responsibility for the emotional impact they bring into your space. Every conversation is a form of energy exchange. And if you leave with a burdened mind and a disoriented heart, that's no longer connection, it's intrusion. The Stoic approach is not to cut off or confront, but to set quiet boundaries. Next time they repeat the same story, ask calmly, what do you think is the first step to improving that? If they dodge, change the topic, or shift blame, you'll know they're not seeking solutions. They're seeking an audience. And you weren't born to be the background to someone's endless tragedy. Remember, you don't need to be cold to protect your peace. You just need to be clear. That clarity is the highest form of kindness to yourself. Chronic complainers aren't dangerous because they're loud. They're dangerous because they slowly reshape how you see the world until you too begin to believe everything is unfair, wrong, and heavy without knowing why. And that's why sometimes your silence is the greatest gift you can give yourself. So you don't have to keep listening to problems that were never meant to be solved. So you can keep your mental clarity for what truly matters. And to remind yourself, peace doesn't come from healing others. It comes from not letting others harm you in silence. 2. the master of excuses. There's a type of person who never says no to you but never truly starts anything either. They agree with their words, nod with their eyes, even promise to change, to act, to break through. But as the day begins, they find a reason to delay. Too busy, not in the right mood, wrong timing, unfavorable conditions. They never reject, they just retreat behind a cloak called reasonable. You don't see them oppose your dreams, but you also never see them take one step toward their own. They slow you down not by force, but by subtly making you believe you're trying too hard, moving too fast, and that you should wait just a little longer. And that little longer stretches into months, years, and sometimes a lifetime. Stoicism does not condemn failure. It only condemns indefinite delay, a tool we often use to escape accountability to ourselves. A Stoic does not wait for the perfect moment. They act even when things are imperfect. Because they understand, every delay is a bargain with potential, and that kind of bargain rarely pays off. The one who makes excuses is not evil, but they are the type who makes you question your own pace and dedication. They make you think discipline is too rigid, effort too extreme, and dreams are something to save for later. But if you're not careful, you'll trade your consistency just to fit into their comfort zone. Be careful with the language you absorb daily. Phrases like, "I'll try," "maybe later," or "it's not the right time yet" may sound harmless, but they seep into your thinking like an underground current until one day you wake up used to doing less than what you're capable of. The Stoic response to this kind of person is not debate, but consistency. You don't need to argue. You just need to keep moving. Let your habits speak for you. Let your steady actions reflect what words can never justify. Your unwavering presence is a gentle reminder. There is another way. No excuses. Just resolve. And if they start calling you rigid, too serious, or inflexible, smile. Because in a world full of excuses, consistency is a quiet rebellion and the foundation of a meaningful life. You don't need to convince anyone to understand your pace. You just need to understand this. Every day you delay, you're offering your dream to circumstance. And every time you choose to act, no matter how small, you're declaring to the world, "I take responsibility, not someday, but now." 3. The gossip dealer. You can find them anywhere at work, among friends, or at a family dinner table. They're the ones who always have a story to tell, always know what's happening behind closed doors, always bring the latest news about someone who isn't there. They make conversations lively, funny, full of surprises, but afterward, you feel strange. Why do I suddenly doubt someone I used to trust? Why does everyone seem flawed? And worse, why do I now feel that gossiping is a normal part of socializing? The gossip dealer isn't necessarily malicious, but they cultivate a toxic habit, making you turn away from self-improvement and look outward to judge others. They don't need to slander anyone outright. They just plant a seed of doubt, drop vague details, share unverifiable tales, and let your imagination fill in the rest. That's enough. You get pulled into their world where watching others becomes more important than watching yourself. Stoicism emphasizes this. A strong mind turns inward, asking, "Have I lived rightly?" instead of, "How has that person lived wrongly?" When you spend your time talking about others, you surrender your attention, the most precious resource, to things outside your power, beyond your ability to improve, and not worth trading your peace of mind for. What makes gossip truly dangerous isn't what's said. It's how it makes you accept that speaking of others' flaws is normal. You begin to blur your own ethical lines, joining in for fun, retelling stories without thinking, and soon you become a copy of the very person you once thought was harmless. A Stoic doesn't need to publicly oppose such people. They just withdraw at the right time. When a conversation brings up someone unrelated, you can quietly say, "I don't know enough to say anything about that." Or say nothing at all, because silence is also a boundary. A Stoic never lets their mind be dragged into careless judgment. They know every second spent criticizing others is a second not lived for oneself. Reflect for a moment. What have your recent conversations been about? People or ideas, mistakes or values? If you find yourself judging more than growing, you may not just be hearing gossip, you may be living inside it. The gossip dealer doesn't need your agreement. They only need your silence, your nod, your passive reception. But you don't have to be part of that cycle. You can walk away. You can preserve the clarity of your mind. And sometimes the deepest peace comes not from what you say, but from choosing not to say anything at all. 4. The silent envy. You share something good, a milestone, a positive change, a small step forward that took you a long time to earn. And they say nothing. No congratulations, no approving glance, no clear response. Just a faint nod, a smile that doesn't reach the eyes. A brief silence you can't name, but you can feel it. The envious don't attack with words, they withdraw, little by little, every time you move toward the light. They don't just avoid celebrating with you, they quietly deny your success through intentional indifference. And the most dangerous part is you can't call them bad, because they haven't done anything wrong. They just go silent at the exact moment you needed sincere presence. Envy is a human emotion we all have. But when it isn't transformed into admiration or inspiration, it becomes a quiet poison that corrodes relationships. The silently envious don't tear you down. They make you start doubting yourself. They plant guilt in you for daring to shine, making you wonder if you're showing off, going too far, or making others feel small. And if you're not vigilant, you'll shrink your own progress just to maintain a false sense of harmony. Stoicism teaches that you were not born to ease others' insecurities by living small. You can empathize with those hurt by your growth, but you are not obligated to pause your journey so they can feel comfortable. A grounded mind does not dismiss others' feelings, but also doesn't let those feelings steer its life. The Stoic way of dealing with envy is not confrontation, but limitation. Limit what you share. Limit how much recognition you seek. Limit how you react to coldness. Sometimes, maturity means keeping your joyful moments to yourself until you find a circle that truly celebrates with you, not quietly competes against you. Watch who goes silent when you succeed, who suddenly grows distant when you rise, who always roots for you when you're weak but disappears when you're strong. Because the truth is, not everyone fears failure. Some fear your success. And if you lack the strength to stand firm in your light, you'll get pulled back into the dark just to comfort those who never wanted to see you shine. You don't need to strain to prove yourself, but you also don't need to apologize for surpassing yourself. Success doesn't require forgiveness. It only asks that you have the courage not to let someone else's silence become the disguise for your own fear. 5. The habitually angry. You've met this type, the kind who can turn the smallest issue into an emotional explosion. A gentle reminder can ignite their rage. A minor delay is enough to make them frown, slam a table, or storm out of a room in heavy frustration. At first, you think they're just having a bad day. But over time, you realize it's not a day. It's who they are. They live as though the world is constantly offending them. They react as if losing control is the only way to be heard. Habitually, angry people don't just create tension, they strip away your sense of safety in everyday interaction. You start choosing words more carefully, texting with caution, tiptoeing through conversations. And worse, you begin to accept chaos as normal. You adjust yourself to avoid triggering them, forgetting that emotional regulation is their responsibility, not your obligation. Stoic philosophy doesn't claim emotions are bad, but warns that if you let them control you, you've forfeited control of yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If someone does wrong, ask yourself, did they truly harm me, or did I choose to be harmed?" The habitually angry live in such a reactive state that any moment becomes an excuse to explode. And to them, this outburst is just who I am, their authentic self, their true instinct. But the truth is this: losing control is not strength, it's surrender. A person ruled by emotion is predictable, easily manipulated, and easily dragged into unnecessary conflict. They believe they're powerful, but all they've done is expose their greatest weakness, the inability to govern themselves. The Stoic response to anger is not retaliation, but neutralization. When they lash out, you don't need to meet anger with more anger. You simply remain still, breathe deeply, and maintain emotional distance. You don't need to win the argument, you only need not be pulled into the storm they carry. A Stoic doesn't use silence to avoid, but as a conscious choice, refusing to become part of someone else's chaos. If someone's anger becomes a repeated burden in your life, you don't have to carry it forever. You can walk away not because you hate them, but because you respect yourself. You can withdraw your energy from places that keep you anxious, afraid, or constantly sacrificing your inner peace to maintain surface harmony. Remember, calmness is not weakness. It's a form of strength the angriest person in the room can't access. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can do isn't to fight back, but to refuse to participate. You weren't born to be the reason someone else loses control. You were born to master yourself and guard your peace like a fortress no one can breach. 6. The drama magnet. They're not loud, like the angry ones, but the chaos they bring is more persistent and unpredictable. Every week is a new crisis, every conversation a swirl of emotions. They always have some big thing to share, a relationship full of drama, an unresolved misunderstanding, someone who deeply hurt them. Yet somehow, the script repeats new names, same pattern. And you, though never cast in the story, get pulled in as if it's your job to unravel their tangled emotions. Drama magnets don't come for advice, they come to hold attention. They don't seek solutions, they crave importance by making everything around them turbulent. One moment, they're the victim. The next, the hero. Then the betrayed soul. They live as though emotions are the measure of existence, and if nothing serious is happening, they'll find a way to stir it up, even subconsciously. Stoicism doesn't demand we eliminate emotion, it asks that we shape it with reason. A Stoic doesn't let themselves be swept away by the emotional storms of others, because they understand the more we react, the more we surrender control. The drama magnet cannot thrive without your reaction. They need you to get angry, flustered, confused, or anxious because your emotion is the fuel for the role they're performing. And the saddest part is you begin to feel exhausted, yet guilty for pulling away. Because they have grown used to your presence. They've made you believe your being there is the only thing keeping them okay. But that's the trap of emotional distortion. You weren't born to be someone else's crisis center, especially when they create the crisis themselves over and over and reject every invitation to break the cycle. The Stoic approach is not cold abandonment, it's learning to anchor yourself in calm. When their emotions rise, you step back. When they try to make their problems your priority, you gently remind them, I believe you're strong enough to face this on your own. When they retell the same story for the 10th time about someone who hurt them, you don't dig deeper, don't offer advice, you simply stay quiet and don't feed the fire. Because the truth is not every storm is worth standing in. Some storms vanish the moment you choose not to step in. And what you must remember is this: your mind is not a stage for everyone to perform on. Guard your silence, not because you're indifferent, but because you know another person's uncontained chaos should not damage the healthiest part of you. You don't need to react to prove you care. Sometimes, calm detachment is the clearest act of love for yourself. 7. The dream doubter in disguise. They don't mock you. They don't laugh in your face. They don't tell you to stop. They just quietly ask a question right after you share a big idea. That sounds risky. Are you sure? And that's enough. A seed of doubt is planted not by an enemy, but by someone you once trusted as an ally. No one forbids you from chasing your dream, but no one truly believes you can. They don't deny your vision, they just don't believe it belongs to you. The dream doubter wears the mask of realism to cover their own fear. They call hesitation wisdom, they call risk aversion maturity, and they call quitting early knowing when to stop. They don't say you shouldn't do it, but they'll tell you about all the people who failed, every possible danger, every worst-case scenario you should be ready for. It sounds like concern, but it's really their anxiety dressed as advice, fogging up your confidence. Stoicism teaches, we don't fear failure, we only fear never trying. Marcus Aurelius didn't advise avoiding danger. He emphasized that courage lies not in knowing outcomes, but in acting rightly regardless. A Stoic doesn't blindly chase dreams, but they also don't let those dreams be killed by someone else's caution. You must understand, not all cautious people are wise. Some have convinced themselves for so long that just enough is fine, and your decision to want more feels threatening. They don't envy your success, they fear your success will expose their own stagnation. So instead of walking with you, they start reminding, cautioning, pulling you back to earth, all wrapped in good intentions. A Stoic doesn't argue. They don't need to prove their dreams are logical. They simply keep going. They listen, but don't absorb. They respect others' fear, but don't let it chart their path. And when doubt creeps in, they remind themselves, every new step carries risk, but there's no greater risk than living a life others feel is safe for you. Watch closely those who always play the realist. Are they truly ahead of you? Are they living the life you want? If not, then their advice is just an echo from a comfort zone trying to pull you back. And you weren't born to live inside someone else's limits. Keep walking. Even if it sounds far-fetched to someone else, you don't need approval to nourish your dream. You only need courage. Courage not to shrink your ambition, and courage to walk even if you must walk alone. 8. The over-positivity enabler. They're always smiling, always saying everything will be fine, always handing you some glittering quote when you're standing in the darkest days of your life. You've suffered a loss, they tell you to focus on the positives. You're confused, they say, don't overthink, just relax. It sounds gentle, timely, well-meaning, but over time, you realize you're not really being heard, not acknowledged, not even allowed to be sad. The overly positive person does nothing cruel. They don't insult you or deny your pain outright. They just sugarcoat every emotion they don't know how to face. They won't let you be honest with your darkness, because if they let you go there, they might have to face their own. They label sadness as bad energy, pain as clinging to the past, wounds as lack of mental control. But emotion, good or bad, is a signal of life, and denying it doesn't make you stronger, it just disconnects you from yourself. Stoic philosophy doesn't ask you to positive think your way through life. It teaches you to face reality, even when that reality is cold, complex, and hard to bear. A Stoic doesn't hide from pain behind a smile. They sit with it, observe it, learn from it, and walk through it with a mind that remains unshaken. Because they know, real strength isn't about always being cheerful, it's about not letting sorrow define your worth. The overly positive person makes you start to associate sadness with weakness. You feel guilty when you're not okay. Feel like a failure when your emotions dip. Feel pressured to normalize what's clearly not right just to fit into the label of positivity they've projected onto you. But pretending to be strong isn't strength. And avoiding pain is not healing. The Stoic response to this is to protect your honest space. If they can't meet you in your darkest moments, you don't have to dim your light just to please them. Choose truthful language. I'm not okay, and I allow myself to feel that. Choose silence over hollow comfort. And believe this: peace doesn't come from always being joyful, it comes when you're no longer afraid to feel pain. A Stoic doesn't reject emotion, they discipline it through clarity. They don't cling to false optimism, nor do they drown in pessimism. They stand between the extremes, alert, steady, and real. Because there's no light more powerful than the one that shines from within after you've walked through the darkness without pretending. 9. The one who lives as a perpetual victim. Some people don't just carry wounds, they live in them. They introduce themselves through past losses. They lead with stories of what went wrong. They cling to old memories as if the past were the only passport they have to take up space in the present. They don't need you to solve anything. They only need your acknowledgement that they were wronged, and the more people agree, the more justified they feel in never changing. Those who default to the victim role rarely make noise or hurt others directly, but they allow their helplessness to seep into others quietly, persistently. They make you feel guilty for being okay. They make you dim your joy just so they don't feel small, and they make you believe their inability to move forward is natural, unquestionable, unchangeable. But the truth is, wounds are meant to be cared for, not grown into an identity. Stoicism teaches us suffering is unavoidable, but defining yourself by suffering is a choice. Epictetus once lost his freedom, lived as a slave, and was beaten until disabled, but he never called himself a victim. He didn't deny what happened, but he refused to let it define who he was. Because he understood we cannot control every circumstance, but we can always control how we respond to it. Those who live in the victim role don't just slow themselves down, they drag down the kind-hearted people who choose to stay. You become their emotional caretaker, shouldering their dissatisfaction because they refuse to let it go. When you speak with optimism, they counter with reasons to despair. You try to lift them from the dark, they quietly pull you in. And if you're not alert, you begin to see the world as unfair, hope as naive, effort as futile, just because you've stayed too long beside someone who treats rock bottom as a lifestyle. The Stoic response is not abandonment, it's setting boundaries. You can say, I understand you've been through pain, but I also believe you can move through it. You're not dismissing their suffering, you're just refusing to enable its extension. You don't do the work for them. You don't offer endless comfort. You don't participate in the denial of responsibility. Because true compassion is not sinking into the mud with someone, it's offering them a ladder and letting them choose whether to climb. You are not heartless for walking away from a relationship that drains you. You're reminding yourself, kindness is not infinite sacrifice. And those who truly want to heal will find a way to rise, not someone to sit in the dark with them forever. Because Stoicism doesn't reject pain, but it refuses to worship it. 10. The Silent Manipulator. They don't yell at you. They don't command, force, or use aggression. But every word, every glance, and every pause is calculated like a chess move in the game of psychological control. They don't control you with power, they control you with guilt, with the fear of loss, with the idea that if you don't comply, you're the one at fault. The silent manipulator plays the role of the wounded. They appear fragile, sensitive, afraid of being abandoned, but it's all designed to make you constantly adjust your behavior so they don't get hurt. They don't need to dominate you directly. They only need to plant the idea, if I act honestly, they might suffer. And so you start shrinking, self-censoring your words, avoiding what's fair and right, just to keep peace with someone who never truly listened to you. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Other people only control your mind if you hand it over to them." And this quiet manipulation is the theft of your inner authority without you even realizing it. You don't need to react harshly. You just need to awaken, because an alert mind is a fortress no one can breach. Step back. Observe instead of reacting. When someone uses emotion to steer you, you don't have to get angry, just stay silent and hold your ground. Because composure is the one language manipulators can't understand and can't endure for long. 11. The one who makes comfort the standard. They don't ask much of you. They don't push you harder or remind you when you're slipping. Instead, they soothe your stagnation with soft words like, "Take it slow, why push yourself? Everyone's tired, it's okay to rest." Or, "Don't force yourself to do what doesn't feel good." It sounds like care, as if they're shielding you from life's pressure, but in truth, they're just justifying complacency in the language of self-love. Those who make comfort the standard aren't necessarily bad. They've simply chosen a way of living so gentle that it avoids any real challenge. And if you stay near them too long, your standards begin to lower too. You skip a workout, they praise you for listening to your body. You delay a project, they say you're tuning into yourself. Over time, you lose track of what's necessary rest and what's quiet surrender to short-term comfort. Each time you try to push your limits, they make you feel like you're doing too much. Stoicism doesn't ask you to suffer, but it teaches you the value of discipline. Seneca once said, "A comfortable life is what we all desire, but true comfort only comes after we've learned how to discipline ourselves." A Stoic doesn't seek out harshness, but neither do they allow themselves to be lulled by soft safety. They know, if you don't master yourself, you'll be led by laziness and mistake it for freedom. You don't need to argue with those who slow you down. You just need to remember, life isn't built on ease, it's built on progress. And progress only happens when you learn to respect discomfort as a necessary part of growth. Hold on to your standards, even when others choose to lower theirs, because living easy is easy. But living with discipline, that is real freedom. I used to think that keeping someone in your life was an act of kindness, a reflection of a generous heart. But the more relationships I went through, the more I realized, not everyone who stays is meant to be kept, and not all patience is a virtue. Some people make you smaller every day, make you doubt yourself, make you choose silence over truth just to preserve a bond that's no longer healthy. Stepping back isn't weakness, it's strength to choose peace over fighting the wrong battles. Setting boundaries isn't coldness, it's the wisdom that even kindness needs protection. And walking away from toxic people doesn't make you bad. It makes you mature. Because in the end, living with a Stoic spirit isn't about suffering in silence, it's about acting with clarity. It's not about staying to endure harm, it's about knowing when to walk away with dignity and calm. If this video resonated with you in any way, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss what comes next. The journey toward inner strength, calm and depth truly begins the moment you stop living by others' expectations and start living by your own standards. And that is the deepest form of freedom a person can have. I'll see you in the next video.